Hello, this is Chris from Brothaspeak Podcast, where we discuss Black LGBT issues and topics. And today we actually decided to do something very special today. We wanted to record an actual town hall meeting that was taking place in the Pride Center located in Wilton, Manors, Florida. And the title of this particular presentation is called, Is Your Man on the Down Low? Now, this is something that's something new that we wanted to try to kind of see exactly what would be the reception. And when it comes to actual live, in-your-face type of interaction with the audience, as well as some of the guests and the people on the panel. So we do have a special presentation we hope you enjoy. Again, this is Chris from Brothaspeak Podcast, and we are presenting a special town hall meeting that is Your Man on the Down Low, presented by the Pride Center in Wilton, Manors. Thank you, and enjoy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. How are you guys doing tonight? Good. We're getting ready to get started. Just to make sure that you are aware, we are going to be on Facebook Live, so it's going to be and we're also doing a podcast with Brothaspeak. So hopefully you guys admire your banner over here. But we just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. If you've never been to the Pride Center, hopefully this won't be your last time coming. How many of you have never been to the Pride Center before? Oh, thank you so much. First time, hopefully you'll come back. We do a lot of great activities here, so there's a lot of meetings, a lot of service for the community, so many great things that do happen here at the Pride Center. And we're trying to become more diverse in terms of the people that come to the center as well. So this room looks very diverse, more so than some of the other activities we have here. So we're glad that you all are able to come out tonight. So that don't seem right. All right, thank you. Again, thank you for coming out to the our community conversation this evening. Is Your Man on the Down Low? It's one of the reasons we want to have this conversation tonight. So if you haven't been to the Pride Center before, we provide a welcoming, safe space for people to come here. It's an inclusive home that celebrates, nurtures, and empowers the LGBT communities and our neighbors here in South Florida. So it's open to everyone, so it's not specifically for the LGBTQ community, it's for everyone. So we are glad that you're here this evening. I want to make some introductions. Are there any elected officials in the house tonight? Don't all raise your hand at once. So there are none. That's fine. I also want to introduce our Kiki team. Jakari is a part of the and we want to thank and we also want to thank the interns that are working with us, Julia, Kiora, and Sita. So again, thank you for coming out to our event tonight. Hopefully you'll get some valuable information. Hopefully you'll be able to share some things that you may have experienced in your lives as well. But one of the things we also want to do is tonight is to really address the high rates of HIV among Black heterosexual women, but also look at the high rates of Black same-gender loving men as well. Those are the areas that we really want to focus on. But we also want to talk about men who are on the down low, or, because when we say the down low, a lot of times it gets a very negative rap, it's a very negative connotation. But when we start looking at, if he were a white man on the down low, they would basically say that he's bisexual or he's closeted. So it's not the same negative connotation as it is when you look at Black gay men. So we're going to talk about that as well. That's going to be one of the areas we want to focus on tonight also. Because when we look at it, there was an article that was written, or a book that was written, and one of the things that this guy wrote, his name is Haru Hatu, and it's he said that when we talk about men are on the down low, it's really a sexist and racist assumption. So if you agree with that, that's the context in terms of how we want to look at it for this evening. And he also wrote that on the narrative in his book, Conjuring Black Funk, Notes of Culture, Sexuality, and Spirituality. When we talk about the down low, it disempowers Black women sexually, intellectually, and morally, as well as demonizes Black men while ignoring the systematic structural forces at work in a racist, sexist, heterosexist, erotophobic, and classist society that places Black women and Black men at greater risk for poverty, death, and also other diseases. Those are some of the areas that are impacted by you as a Black person sometimes in our community. And it's not necessarily, and sometimes it's systematic in terms of how these things actually happen. It's not just by happenstance that we look at HIV rates among Black people. That the high rates are among Black people. Some of those things are systematically done because sometimes we don't have access to the same type of health care, don't have access to the same medications. So therefore, those are the things that impact us. And then we start looking at how HIV is very stigmatizing in the Black community. We don't talk about it like other races may talk about it. And when we talk about HIV in the community, what's the first thing we say? It's like, oh, they got the ninja, they got these other things. We don't even talk about it from the proper context of what the words are. And then we don't talk about it in our households. So if someone does have HIV, a lot of times we're afraid to share that with even our family members, not even other people, but our family members. So these are some of the things that we do want to address tonight in terms of looking at how HIV has impacted our community, especially our Black women, our sisters who have supported us, and also our Black same-gender loving men. We also want to talk about it from the down low perspective also in terms of looking at that as to not necessarily as a demonizing component, but also just looking at why are these men on the down low? Some of it stems from, in our community, if you're homosexual, that's a stigma right there. So therefore, a lot of people, they are afraid, they don't feel comfortable coming out with their sexual orientation. Because you come out in some households, you say that you're gay, the first thing that happens, they're gonna beat the gay out of you. They're gonna pray the gay out of you. They're gonna kick you out of the house. All these types of things happen when you bring homosexuality into our household, because we don't talk about sex. First of all, we don't talk about heterosexual sex in Black communities in many instances. So of course you're not going to talk about homosexual sex. So those are some of the things we really want to kind of touch on tonight. We have a great panel here, panelists that what they're going to do, they're going to introduce themselves. We're not going to do this long dissertation of introductions of each person, so we're going to have them introduce themselves, and after each one introduces themselves, we're going to ask them a question. So if you hear something that's kind of piques your interest, please ask a question. So we're going to open it up. After we have all the panelists have opportunities to speak, then we're going to open up to the community and ask questions as well. So we're going to start on the end with Melvin. I think there's a microphone there.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Is this on? Can everybody
Let's press
hear
the little button.
I think I'm on now. Yeah? Awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Melvin Ford, and for the past 10 years, I worked at Empower You Community Health Center, which is located in Miami. At the center, I wore a number of different hats. I oversaw and implemented the Empowerment Project, which is for same-gender loving men between the ages of 18 and 30. I also implemented and I provide counseling, couple counseling, as well as one-on-one counseling for the clear intervention. I've since transitioned my work from Empower You. Right now I'm a community advocate and event planner for the communities.
All right, thank you, Melvin. So you'll be our first person to answer a question tonight. I'm going to ask you the question, what do you see as the reason or reasons for high rates of HIV among Black heterosexual females?
I think you mentioned, you stated before, systematically. I think that's part of the reason. Lack of education, I think, is a great reason as to why rates amongst this target population is increasing. Culture, environment, stigma is very alive for this target population, so I think that those are contributing factors for.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Any other panelists would like to chime in on that particular question?
I just also agree. Culture plays a big role. I know I'm Haitian American, and culturally, like, it's a big stigma that we just don't talk about it. When I was growing up, and a lot, even till now, I would say that, especially for the older, a lot of the Caribbean families, I see that a lot. Just being close with them, where we don't talk about it, and it wasn't until you got to college, where you're really talking about it and you're meeting people and you're having conversations. But I know, like, even when it comes to people in your family who may have HIV or AIDS, or for women, heterosexual women, I just even know what you mentioned earlier, where we knew that that's the reason why they passed away, but basically they took it to their grave. So.
All right, thank you. So now we have you introduce yourself, and we'll ask you another question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lorenzo, and I am professionally, I work as a senior attorney for the Guardian Ad Litem program in Miami-Dade. So I work with a lot of different families in the dependency system, each child with children that are abused, abandoned, and neglected, as well as I served as the Young Professional Network's president for the Urban League of Broward County, which we are an auxiliary organization for the Urban League of Broward County, which has been established since 1975. And one of our pillars is the health. And so we do focus on doing a lot of advocacy towards that as well.
All right, thank you. What do you think can be done differently to address the high rates of HIV among Black women?
Can you speak up? Because the back can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Say that question one more time.
Okay. What do you think can be done differently to address the high rates of HIV among Black heterosexual women?
I think one of the things that Melvin mentioned was education. I think just educating, especially within the Black community, I think a lot of times we don't talk about sexuality, right? We wait until, or we pretend like it's not happening, right? And then it's like, oh, hey, I didn't know my daughter was sexually active. I didn't know my son was sexually active. I think just the education, talking at a very young age, and not making it seem like, a lot of times what happened is people already, at a young age are already exposed to that, and then, things come up, or, STDs and all that come up, and then we're trying to solve the problem. It's already too late. Like, we need to inform our children at a young age and educate them at a young age what it looks like to protect yourself, what it looks like to be in relationships and things like that. I think that's really important.
Oh, thank you, because a lot of times, in reference to relationships, a lot of times, some of our children, they don't see healthy relationships, so they see these dysfunctional relationships that their mothers are in, their uncles, aunts, and their family, so they don't really know what a good relationship looks like. So they accept a lot of times negative behavior in relationships, and that's the norm, because that's what they experienced.
I want to chime off of what she was saying. Along with that, we also need to get, with the education, is to get the churches more involved with educating the community as well. Educating the church, and so that the church is able to educate the community also.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the churches that's a very big one that the churches need to get more involved. There are some churches that are involved, so we don't want to paint a brush that no churches are working in it. There are some that do really good work in terms of opening their doors to do testing, and also allowing you to do education with their congregation. But of course, we need more of that needs to be done. So we'll go over here, introduce yourself, and then we'll have a question for you.
My name is Michelle Stokely. I am an HIV positive female that has lived and worked in the community for over 15 years. I am currently working at Children's Diagnostic and Treatment Center, where I work with pregnant women. But I've worked with the health department, with AIDS Healthcare Foundation, also Broward House. So I'm familiar with the community and worked with our community closely.
Okay. The question for you is, what do you see as a reason or reasons for high rates of HIV among Black, same-gender loving men?
My perception would be that they stay in the same pool. They won't go out and outside of where they are. They stay in their community, so instead of venturing out, it stays right where they are. That's the best I can kind of describe that.
Okay, and I do understand it, because a lot of times when you look at some Black same-gender loving men, we do tend to stay in the same pool, and since we have a high prevalence of HIV in our community, if you're dating in that same pool over and over again, there's a high probability of becoming infected with HIV. Did anyone else on the panel want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I did. Well, first, I don't think we should take it for granted that we're all using the term same-gender loving men, because still that's a largely inclusive term. Most people don't realize that there's a sexual spectrum, and that also creates stigma, which is why people aren't DL. So I think that and also we have to talk about the hyper-masculinity of Black men. Black men don't feel comfortable to express themselves outside of in a relation to like the white patriarchy, and so you still have like a legacy of white supremacy in the Black community that kind of renders Black men docile if we're not very hyper in our masculinity, and that can leak into our sexuality, our gender presentation. So once you have all those forces against Black masculinity, to be in other black men, which is to be queer, whatever that is, it's kind of an existential dilemma. Like, what do I do now? And so then you stay within your own community and you stay among your own people. And if you have already a high rate of HIV in the community, it just keeps going around. So I think what we all touched on is about education. We have to educate in the black community, and especially in the church, because black folks are very religious and highly and deeply indoctrinized by religion. So if it isn't in the church, then we're not going to really get that education. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that on the panel? No? All right, so Jonathan, introduce yourself and then we'll ask you a question.
Well, that's redundant. But I'm Jonathan. I
know what you do.
Oh, okay. Wait. Yeah. So I work at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. I'm a grassroots mobilizer, so I do a lot of sex talks, and I promote sexual health and prevention techniques for not contracting STDs or things like that. I just recently graduated from FAU in the fall with the degree in philosophy, and this is really what I wanted to do. So I'm very just happy to be down here and mobilizing in my community. So yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for participating in our panel tonight. The question for you is, what can we do differently to address the high rates of HIV among black same-gender loving men?
Okay. Well, I think this is very light. I want heavy, right? My hands are heavy. But I think that we first have to start with addressing what it means to be a black man, not only in America, but what it means to be a black man in the black community. There is still not enough conversation among black men about anything really besides, objectifying women in sports, pretty much. So what we have to do, we have to humanize ourselves and realize that we are vulnerable to disease, vulnerable to heartbreak, vulnerable to anything that's human. Black men are still dehumanized, and we're made to feel as though we have to keep up this very hard exterior in order to be validated. So I think the question about HIV among queer or same-gender loving men, it has to start with what it means to be a black man and how you can express that in ways that are different than what is typically shown in the news or the media. Once you do that, then we can start talking about education. How do you educate black men on sexual health? And how do you destigmatize like condom usage? Just like people are so afraid of like using condoms because it doesn't feel good or whatever. But we have to start saying that there are other condoms that you can use. Like the other day when I was talking to you about different versions of condoms that are more comfortable for size or for lubrication or for even material. So it's so much deeper than just the HIV/AIDS epidemic. We have to start talking about first what it means to be a black man and what it means to have knowledge on sexual education.
All right, thank you. The question for you is, what are some entities in the black community that can address and assist with exactly what you're saying in terms of educating our communities?
Wait, we go again? Oh, okay. Repeat the question? Sorry. Repeat the question, I'm sorry. And I'm like a goofball, so you just give me a minute.
Okay. What are some entities in the black community that can address these issues of HIV?
I think the church, first and foremost, because I grew up in the church, and I wanted to piggyback off of what these ladies were saying. I think we have to destigmatize what it means to be a same-gender loving man within the church. I think that until we begin to challenge the church to be more inclusive, we're not going to be able to have these open and honest conversations. The other week, AHF, not the week, but the other month, AHF collaborated with the Numa Olive, and there was this gentleman named B. Slade. He's an out gay man, and he's also a Christian, and he was saying some very blunt things about gay sex in the church, and I was just so happy because you never hear about straight sex in church, and then you never hear about queer sex in church. But if the church has the power to affect knowledge and the way we shape people, then they should also be held accountable to the way we shape people and the way we educate people. You can't push heteronormativity because it's just not practical anymore. My generation is very gay. There are so many people who just are along the spectrum. Like me myself, I don't only date women. I just any given day, I feel what I feel, and there are a lot of dudes that are like me. So we need education for dudes that like who don't have the resource to go to school and get a degree in philosophy. We need accessible education, and that starts with childhood in the church.
Okay. No.
Yeah, why not? I'd like to go back to the previous question that you actually posed. What would we do differently? Is it on? Can you guys hear me?
No, we can't hear in the back.
So what can we do differently?
A little louder.
What can we do differently? Can you hear me now? All right, so what can we do differently? I think that we're doing a lot of good things in the community. And I think that if we just continue to do those things, we'll see some result. It's not going to happen maybe in our lifetime. But I think if we continue to do revisiting some of the campaigns that are out there, continue to revisit those messages to make sure that they're relevant and they're current. And then changing the roles. I think that one of the things that I was impacted with working with the young target population with the Empowerment Project, it was important for me to move out of the way and allow other people to kind of plant seeds, make sure that their voices are heard, to kind of continue spearheading, leading, those campaigns and engaging young people.
All right, thank you. One of the things that you did mention was in terms of doing something different. When we start doing things differently, especially in our community, we tend to get into our patterns in terms of this is what we've done time and time again. And when we've done it so many times, it gets to a point where it becomes somewhat benign in terms of our community, in terms of actually helping them to grow and move forward. So what can we do beyond the things we've done in the past in terms of educating with the church, because a lot of churches are involved, not all and not many, but there are some churches. What are some other entities in the Black community that need to get involved with HIV that have not engaged us and engaged this particular topic or subject area?
I want to say the schools, and not make it so hard for us to be able to get it. They're starting to let us come in and educate, but it's still hard. They're allowing us to now come in and give out condoms and the information, but it shouldn't be so hard. It should be the norm that they're educating. I remember seeing the videos when I was younger and in school, and I mean, the information we're given now is life. It gives life, and it should be able to help just as much as the health information that they're given in schools already. We're to add to it. And to know that they have to have a waiver or sign something to be educated on HIV with knowing the statistics in our area is crazy. So I would say the schools, along with the community organizations that are out here that have been doing this. But also, when you were saying how else do we get it, because we have been doing this for years, is to get the younger generation involved with the older generation so that they can work together. Because things are new out there. We don't always get a chance to hear. So that's why I do the younger youth groups, to hear what's going on. And if you hear the things that they're saying at school, the new lingo that they're using, it's ridiculous. So you're like, really? But you need to do that so that you can keep updated on everything that's going on too.
I wanted to also talk about the schools. Because everybody, well, not everybody, because there's so much queerness in my generation now, like there are people who are trans folks have to come out like a lot earlier, and we have to get education that isn't really heterosexual sex information. Like kids are having sex a lot earlier. There's a stat that I was given that kids are having sex in like 5th grade, and who knows, what their sexual orientation is at that age and how they're developing. So we have to also teach that there are other ways to have sex other than heterosexual sex. So we have to make people feel more included. Like, if you're not being taught that no, my sex is valid, then that's what prompts the DL. That's what's first along HIV. We need people to feel validated. We don't have to. We shouldn't make people feel as though their sexual practices are othered or like are marginalized, because there are a lot of queer folk, there are a lot of trans folk. They've always been here. They're just more out now. So we have to make them feel more inclusive, so that way they don't feel as though they have to be DL, and that doesn't keep this spread going. So it's about having a more inclusive educational system. It's not that there is a gay agenda, but we do have to admit that this is a multicultural and multisexual generation, and we can't just only preach heterosexual safe sex. We have to preach safe anal sex, safe oral sex, sex with people of different genders, and that needs to start in elementary, middle school, because that's when they get the information. It's just music, it's on TV, it should be an education system.
All right, thank you.
And I would say, even in the legal system, just being around, just having, sometimes I work with volunteers primarily who go out and do home visits and speak to teachers, and a lot of times it's difficult because, you know, we're sometimes boxed into what you all saying, we're kind of boxed into what we know, what we're used to, and so when you're talking to some of the volunteers or even families, you're also having to do a lot of education, right? So even if their children are placed with homosexuals, heterosexuals, families, you have to a lot of the time continue to educate them, even in the legal field, on what it looks like. It may not look like what you're used to, but it's also being understanding and also teaching the children there in the system that it's, you know, if you are, you know, figuring out your sexuality and where you're going, it's okay. So I think that comes with just continues to having, just not only having community conversations, but also mentorships or people that they can connect with, where it's like, okay, as I'm going through this or I'm discovering this, I know how it looked like, even if, because a lot of times what I would say is that, because I even had to have a volunteer and I had to tell her, like, you know, because she was very conservative and she was like basically alluding that this wasn't a good home, and I was like, oh, you know, are they safe? Are they taking good care of the children's needs and things like that? I think that's, and she was from a different country and very conservative, like I said before, but it's a constant that I think even in the legal system that I see on a day-to-day basis.
All right, thank you. And I think that's a part of it also, that if you are a Black, same-gender loving man, we need to be mentors. We need to get more involved in other activities. We need to be visible also, so therefore we need to be open about our sexual orientation in the communities, because if they don't know who these people are, these gay men who are in our community, they're going to continuously label us in terms of we're pedophiles, we're all the things that we are not. But until you stand up and stand in the light and be visible, they're going to continue to have their own stereotypical views of who you are as Black, same-gender loving men. And I think that's the other part of it. We have to start to be open and honest about our sexual orientation in our families, in our churches, in our neighborhoods, and our jobs. Being open and being able to walk in the light and being able to be comfortable in your own skin, alluding to what you're saying. Being comfortable in your own skin, whatever that looks like, and however you choose to label it for yourself. Also, how do you think we should address or engage these entities in terms of like the NAACP, the Urban Leagues, all these other organizations that are to do work for us as a people? How do we engage them in terms of addressing HIV or homophobia in our communities? Anyone can jump in.
They're just, we want big organizations to like represent us, but there's still like, in the grassroots level, because sex is still very taboo, I can't expect for a large organization to talk about it. And heterosexual sex is still very taboo, so I can't expect for homosexual or for trans sex to be like on the main stage being talked about. So I think because people would say that, oh, if you want to change, become a politician, it's the people's job. You know, we have to be the one putting pressures on our own organizations. If the NAACP isn't representing communities of color, then they're not doing their job. So we have to be putting pressure on these major corporations and these major community organizers to say, this is happening in our community, and you can't represent us if you're not representing us.
Okay. Anyone else? No?
I also think that starting at home, I think that that's so important. You know, I think that a lot of things that end up happening to, you know, a lot of our youth is because they're not being mentored and loved and cared for and just guided from home. So I think that parents need to be better parents, you know, to really address and be able to direct, you know, youth.
And I agree with that. I think that there was a time in Black communities, it was like we always used the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. We moved away from that because sometimes now, if you try to raise someone else's child or even try to give them some directions, now you have to deal with the mother. So you're not even at a point so you can even address the child's concern issue, the thing that happened with the child, because the mother's all in your face like, you don't talk to my children like that. And so that we have to get back to trying to work that we're all brothers and sisters and we're all in this together to try to create a better tomorrow and the next generation. And until we do that, we're going to continuously have the same type of problem. Like you're saying, it starts at the home, but I have to teach my children to be respectful and mannerable so when they're out in public, no one's going to have to chastise them. So it's not going to be an issue with another parent trying to chastise my child because hopefully they're being mannerable with the parents and the other people that they're coming in contact with. The next question is, how does the down low contribute to high rates of HIV among in our communities, or does it?
I think it does. I think I'm just even thinking about while I was in college, there was a lot of obviously a stigma, and especially I'm in a sorority, and especially among the sorority and fraternity life. And I know I had one of my best friend who her ex-boyfriend ended up, he came out later on. But it was a big thing because it was like, oh, we don't really want to talk about it, or oh, you're, like with the name calling, and oh, you're not going to join the fraternity because you're this or you're that. And so I think a lot of times, we have this download or guys who are not open about their sexuality, who are dating women, and because of, for whatever reason, they don't come out, or like I said, in college, I've seen that some of them come out, but I know there's some who, they still date women, they marry women, and that they're down with us.
Jonathan.
All right. So this is kind of controversial, but I don't think anyone should have to come out. I always try to, because I also do a lot of Black Lives Matter stuff, so I always look at the context of what it means to be Black versus what it means to be white. And so I'm looking at what it means to be straight versus what it means to be queer. When I was exclusively dating women, I didn't have to tell my parents that, oh, I'm exclusively dating women. And so I feel like queer folks should get that same right. If you don't feel as though you have to sit down and say, Mom, now I'm dating men. Like, why do you have to do that? But I think it's because, we feel like forced to say, like, to declare myself rather than being myself. That is not to say that you shouldn't tell your your girl you cheat on what to do, because that's just courtesy. But I don't want people to feel as though their sexuality has to be a community phenomenon. That's not what I feel that that's very objectifying, in the same way that my Blackness can be objectified. I don't think anyone should be reducible to their sexuality or to their ethnicity. Also, when it comes to the spread of HIV within the DL community or whatever, dudes just don't wear condoms. Dudes only wear condoms because their girl make them wear condoms. And so if you have two men who are like, let's just not wear condoms, then they're just not going to wear condoms, and that also perpetuates the spread. So I think it's about having a partner who holds you accountable to sexual health. I've been with women who are like, listen, you're just not doing this unless you have a condom. But some dudes would be like, yo, what's up? I'm like, no, you have to strap up. So I think it's about having a partner because if you're with someone who doesn't care about you enough to like wear condoms to know your sexual health, then you shouldn't be with them in the first place. So you have to start dating and sleeping with people who are just as concerned about your health as they are with theirs. And it doesn't show that they're concerned about either one of your health if you're not willing to wear a condom.
I agree with that. The first thing is like, if I'm protecting myself, then I'm protecting you. So therefore, that becomes the first part of it. So I look at it always about self-preservation. So if I'm protecting me, then that automatically protects the person I'm having sex with as well. So those are the type of things. That's how I kind of look at it in terms of making sure that you're covering yourself and making sure that you're protecting yourself and the person that you're having sex with. One of the things that we do have in our community is a lot of stigma that's around HIV and also being homosexual or gay in the Black community. Those are things that we always have to, it's a part of our community, and the stigma is always there. And one of the things that you said, Jonathan, about why did people have to come out, this is just my personal opinion. I think that people need to come out primarily because we live in a heteronormative society. So everything is like, if you're dating anyone, your family automatically assumes that you're dating someone of the opposite sex, automatically. So therefore, that's why for me, I think it's very important that we do come out and we do let people know what our sexual orientation is, because therefore it also demonstrates to the younger generation that you can have life, you can have a partner, you can have a husband, you can build a life with a person who is of the same sex. And we don't show that, then they're never going to know that, and we're going to continue to have these another generation of down low men, because a part of it is where that comes from, because they feel as though they can't come out, so therefore I can't come out, I have to do what society says. Society teaches us that if you're a man, you have a what? You marry a wife. If you're a female, you have what? You get a husband. So therefore, that's what society teaches us. And until we, as people who are same-gender loving, we have to demonstrate that no, you can have you can have two men in a relationship and you can build a life together, or you can be two women, you can build a life together. And those are the things that we need to show the next generation, and also show our family that our relationships are respectful and their relationships that are just as important as their relationships, because a lot of times they don't give us the same respect because we don't respect it. So if you don't respect it, then why should I? So that's just my personal opinion about that. Oh.
I'll take it.
I have another question for the panel, and then we're going to start to venture out into the audience. How and at what age did you learn about sex, sexuality, and safer sexual practices?
I'm going to say probably 10, 11 in elementary, because that's when they started showing the videos, and you see the sperm and, you know, the picture of the penis and the fallopian tubes. But to say I probably really understood what it was, probably not until later.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when I started, you know, seeing the different videos and the conversation it came about. But to really know, like, I guess my own sexual self was probably high school. Now understanding what the fallopian tubes and all that really was, and what it meant to me as a woman.
For me, sex, I would say early teens. For sexuality, I think late teens to early adulthood, early 20s. When we went to college, I think I really started trying to discover who I was, and safe sex practices, that's an evolving process. I think some of the things that I feel like I engaged in last year, I've been educated to know that there's some risk to those things, so that's an evolving process for me.
I would say probably early teens as well. My mother was a young mother, so she kind of talked to us a lot about that, at 16, so that was, and it was very different because she's Haitian, so that was different. But sexuality, I would say also later on, late teens as well. So safer sex, I would say in between, because she kind of always talked about that. Not that she was saying to, but she was saying if you are, you get pregnant early, and she goes through all that whole spiel, but I know for the most part, a lot of other things I learned until later on.
How and at what age did you learn about sex, sexuality, and safer sex practices?
Like, I was like 8 or 9, because we had like a lot of, my elementary school was like pretty proactive as far as sexual education. I didn't learn about sexuality until I was so old. Like, well, y'all don't think I'm like mad young. To me, I'm old, I'm 24. But when I was like, I'm old, it was to me. So when I was 20, I love Frank Ocean, by his new album, by the way. But he wrote this like beautiful letter about his sexuality, probably in 2012, and I was out of school, because I dropped out of school before I went back to school. And when I read that, it really made me interested in sexual spectrum, which led me to philosophy. So I think just that, like around age 21, I started really to discover myself, because a lot of folks, like I know a lot of my bi counterparts, they just don't feel welcomed out the straight or the gay community. So you kind of have to be by yourself and figure things out. So for me, it was just like, listening to a bunch of Frank Ocean and like just educate myself in school and having good teachers. I was about 20.
All right, thank you.
But hold on, 1 second. I wanted to make a very important point that even though I learned about sex in school when I was 8 or 9, you have kids who are learning about sex at 8 or 9 on their phones. We have to talk about how pornography is. I know, like, because my work is very pornography positive, but I'm not porn positive when it comes to the internet and kids, because kids are like, they just have, like, I know I'm young, but kids are just so much more exposed to things that I was not even exposed to 10 years ago. So we have to talk, I would want my kids to be educated about sex before I give them a phone, and then they get exposed to everything. Yeah. So we have to talk about sexual education in the context of the internet generation.
True, and I thank you for that. That's very important because we don't talk about it sometimes. We talk about sex sometimes, but we don't necessarily talk about it from the perspective of how do we educate our communities, how do we educate our children to really have them to understand what sex is really about and really make them understand that their body is a temple and they should cherish it. And they shouldn't just give it to any and everybody. They should really be selective about the people and persons that they choose to have sex with. But a lot of times our children are not taught that. And sometimes they're not taught that because they observe their parents being not selective about the people that they share their bodies with. So you have to kind of be very, when you're teaching, you have to role model what you're trying to teach your children as well. Yeah.
What I'm seeing, at least in the 3 years that I've been at the Garden at Lighten program, is that you're seeing at a very young age, like you're having 3-year-olds, you're having 4-year-olds, like because they've seen their parents having sex, or they're seeing pornography, or now you're trying to provide services because now they're in the system, and now that they can't, I have one of my cases where this child can't even, he's 10 years old, a black young man that cannot be around any other children, and he's in the foster system because the services that he needs is so intense where he's sexually acted out on his siblings, his sisters, his brothers, every younger child, so that's one of the problems that we even have for placing him, because now you have to find a home that's willing to possibly adopt him as the only child. So I think even in the system, you're just seeing it even at a younger age, as you mentioned, that it's becoming very problematic, because you're not just dealing with now having to resolve the issues with the family, the mother, the father, the boyfriends. Now you're having to deal with, well, how are we going to place this child back in a home with other siblings or other young kids that they're going to sexually act out on?
Wow, that's very interesting. When we start looking at our children, and a lot of times in blacks, especially in the same gender community, a lot of us don't have children, so it's not something that's like at the forefront of our thought processes. But even though we don't have children, the children in our communities are still ours, and we still should be responsible for them as well. The next question I want to go to is, what are your thoughts about intimacy between two black same-gender loving men? Silence.
I think we need more of this. I think intimacy is something that's been downplayed prior to, at least for me, prior to penetration sex. I think intimacy was very important. When I was a young kid coming up, and we rubbed up against, the females, we felt like, it was on and popping. We were really creating some things. And once we started having penetration sex, all of that went out the window. Holding hands and, having intimate conversations, really getting to know each other beyond just having sex. So I think that intimacy is so important, and it needs to be something that needs to be revisited, needs to be, really pushed in relationships.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
What were you saying? Oh, I'm sorry. What was the question? I'm so bad at it. What was the question again?
What are your thoughts about intimacy between two black same-gender loving men?
What regard?
Whatever you choose, whatever regard you want to respond to it.
Oh, it's cool. I don't know what to say. Because when you said that, I immediately thought of representation, because when it's just like when someone talks about what do you think of interracial dating, I would think about where's representation. And with that aspect, it's just such a big elephant in the room, because if you see queer folk on television who are being intimate, it's like, okay, they're people, but they're gay people. Right. If you see people like on television and they're having sex, and heterosexual, like, oh, they're heterosexuals, but she's white, he's black. So I feel like it's, because you made a really good point about you want people to feel comfortable about coming out, because we need to see more positive, visible roles of queer folk. But for me, it's like I'm so afraid of like the heteropatriarchy objectifying queerness and blackness that for me it's just it's such a precious thing, because it's like when you do see two men having an intimate moment, you do see two men having an intimate moment. It's not you see an intimate moment, you just see two men. Versus when you see a heterosexual couple, it's just so people just having a loving moment. So I'm just very particular about how we objectify these representations. If I see it done poorly, it's just like, well, we just it shouldn't be done. But I think we kind of have to normalize all types of love and intimacy, and for that to happen, I guess there will be cases where folks do feel like the object in the room, like this is the representation of what it means to be black or what it means to be queer, and that makes me feel uneasy, because I don't like being reducible to a black body or to a straight body or to a queer body, because there's so much more to people than just their sexuality and their race. But to your point, you do need representation.
True, thank you for that. But I guess when I look at it, I think that it really goes to demonstrate that when we see intimacy between two men, that it should just be normal. And I think that's the whole point, because if you don't continuously see it, you're going to always say it like you were saying, oh, it's two men, they're together. But we want to get to a point where it's a couple. It doesn't matter what the sexes are. It's a couple. Oh, they're having a moment, and that's all it is. As opposed to, oh, that's a straight couple. Oh, that's a gay couple. Oh, no, we don't necessarily have to look at that, because we have to look at it like you were saying. We're all people, and it's just a couple that's sharing an intimate moment. Be it two men, two women, or a man and a female.
That's one thing. Can I just say one more thing? I'm sorry. Because to your point, there was my ex and I, we were dating it before. He previously was dating a DL dude, and he was like he just couldn't date any more DL dudes because he didn't like feeling as though he couldn't hold his partner's hand in public. And so for me, that was my first boyfriend. And like people like normally sing around girls, and I was like, I don't want to be. I can't say it's more offensive, but I want to be on the look, and not hold my. Nothing. I don't want to be no punk and not hold my lover's hand in public. So I think that and that's from like on the illness. So I think that we have to have it takes a lot of courage to be queer in public, to be black in public. So I think that we have to to your point, we have to have a certain degree of courage to say, yo, I'm here and like I'm not finna not hold my dude's hand because we're in like a straight space, or I'm not finna not hold my white girl's hand because we're like in a black space and think about like, why is this dude with a white girl? So I think we have to look at love as what it is. Like a big critic of I don't know if anyone's seen Get Out, but the guy who wrote it, Jordan Peele, he's married to a white girl, and everybody's like, oh, how can you make a movie about white supremacy while you're getting a white girl? But it's just like, it's love. If you love somebody, it shouldn't matter their gender or their race. You just love them. So I think once that gets normalized, then we can have proper representation without feeling objectified.
True. Thank you for that. The next question we're going to do, this is the last one for the panel, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. This was, how would you describe the black community's inclusion of black same-gender loving men? Or are they included in the black community? Okay. You're thinking. Okay. So while they're thinking, we can also look at. You ready? Oh, you're ready. Okay.
So you were asking about the black community, and
okay, their inclusion of the same gender loving communities, particularly black men.
Yeah, I'm going to get very kind of like Jesus-y theological and very kind of like philosophical. Most people don't know what it does to the individual psyche to be hearing from like age 5 and up, you're going to hell for liking someone of the same gender. It's existentially traumatizing. You do not have the right or the divine or theological or God authority to tell someone where they're going to go based upon their attraction. But what that does is after that age, you start, there's a sort of self-hatred. It's like, I'm not allowed into my own community because of who I sleep with. So we have to start, it doesn't even It doesn't even have to be a conversation of tolerance, because I don't know if anyone's in here seen Moonlight. It's not even about figuring out at this age if you are queer or not. It's really about you feeling like you're accepted into a loving environment. And the Black community has not done that. I would never say that in a white space, because people would be like, oh, I got you there. But I would say that I can be critical of my community and saying that the homophobia is just psychologically damaging. And that is what leads to the phenomenon. Because the stuff like, you have dudes who pick on out queer folk and they're DL. Like that type of masculinity is what leads to rape culture. It's what leads to all sorts of sexual violences, but that stems from the home. And the Black community is particularly needs to be held accountable for that. Because what we do to individuals, we isolate people and we turn soft and human boys into hardened criminals because of that type of hypermasculinity. That's on us. So I think that we, the Black community, I feel like we have a lot of valid argument skills against white supremacy, but the ways in which we treat boys who don't identify as straight, that's on us, and we have to start changing that like right now, because a lot of it does something to you to hear for decade after decade, I'm going to hell, I'm not valid, my love is not valid, who I love is not okay. It's like it should be so simple to say to someone that you love, that's valid. That counts as something. But the stigma, with being queer in the Black community is internally violent. It's not only that you're getting hate from outside, from within the community, but you're getting hate within yourself. You don't like what you look at in the mirror, and that's damaging. So I hold the Black community particularly responsible for that.
Thank you, and I agree with that. But I also hold the Black same gender loving community responsible, because if you're not open and showing people who we are, then they're stereotype of who we are all they know. So we have to start to show them other sides of the community. And until we do that, we're going to continuously have families who are going to be very negative to our children, being very negative to their sons who may act a certain way. I mean, the other part of that is when we start to look at our community, especially Black communities, most Black boys are even taught at an early age not to show your emotions. So you're taught early on not to show your emotions. You can have a 5-year-old boy, a 5-year-old girl, both of them fall and skin their knees. 5-year-old girl, she's picked up, she's held, she's nurtured, she's coddled, she said, oh baby, it's gonna be okay. What happens to the little boy? Suck it up, be a man up. That's what you're being taught at an early age, not even to show that when you're hurt, to demonstrate and say, I am hurting. So what do you think happens to that same little 5-year-old boy who doesn't know how to show his emotions at 5 when he's 25, when he's 30? The exact same thing, but now he's grown into this hardened person who does not know how to show his emotion to his lover, to anyone. So therefore, and so we have to start at our home, like we were saying earlier, it's about parenting. We have to start at the home to actually teach our children that if you are hurt, that you can say, Mommy, this hurts, instead of telling the little boys to suck it up and be a man, because they're children.
And to that point, I'm so sorry, but
I don't think you really are.
But when that does happen, you have America, because America is still very patriarchal, and also men are in control. So if men aren't getting taught how to be emotionally intelligent, you have very extremely exclusive and patriarchal political structures. If we raise our men to be emotionally intelligent and emotionally vulnerable, we'll have a better America. Because men are empowered. The patriarchy is still a thing. Like from misogyny to transphobia, all these things stems from the patriarchy. So until we start teaching that men should be held accountable for their emotional intelligence, this is going to keep happening. And America suffers from that. So yeah.
True. All right. Anyone else want to respond to that? If not, I'm going to go into the audience. Can I give you guys this one? And I'll take this one. So does anyone have a question, a comment, or anything? Young lady right here, Cassandra?
Yes.
All right, Cassandra.
Okay. While you all were talking, like my theory brain was like itching to talk. But so I was thinking, I'm a note taker. One of the things that I think that lacks within the Black community is really a few things. The acceptance of infidelity for men and the force of monogamy for women. And I think that plays a role in the aspect of the spread of HIV. And then also the lack of talk about sexual assault and how often it happens to both our boys and our girls.
Yeah.
When you told me that story about that little boy, instantaneously I could think that boy doesn't just sexually act out. He was probably raped or molested.
Yes.
So children that are 3 and 4 acting in these kind of mannerisms is not something that they internalize just from like porn or watching their parents have sex. Other adults or other people have portrayed those same actions onto them. And then that's something where children are in 5th grade having sex, thus, creating a culture where chlamydia is rampant in middle schools and gonorrhea is rampant in middle schools, but yet we're not talking, but yet we're afraid to talk. So the statistics are there to say that there's something not being done, but yet we're not listening to it.
I just want to go off what you were saying, because a lot of times what we're finding out and when we're doing psychologicals and different evaluations from the parents who oftentimes are in the foster care system themselves, is that that's when they disclose that they were sexually assaulted. And so you see this cycle that continues to go on, and you're not really addressing the issue that you were saying. So you brought up a great point.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question, comment? Okay, we'll start here.
Yes.
Work our way around.
Okay. My name is John, and it was in regards to the SGL men and women, I guess, not being out. Or I do agree that it helps society along for us to be visible. But I also respect people's right to. I was allowed to take my time to come out, and it was my decision to come out. But I think everybody else should have that same privilege. And I have a dear friend of mine some years ago who was struggling with his sexuality, and he likes transgender people. But he had a crisis, so we went and sat by a lake and we talked. And I said, first of all, it's nobody's business, and you don't have to tell anybody. You just have to be real with yourself about what you feel. Just be honest with yourself. It's nobody else's business. You don't have to tell anybody if you choose not to. But I think that's a more important lesson, that just you have to be secure with yourself in your own skin. And then if you choose to share that with other people, you can. But the other point is, I think it's wonderful that we have such a diverse representation of gays now in film and television. And I think it's really film and television that has the power to change public opinion on this. So I think there's no better time to be gay, I think, than now, where we have visual representation with shows like, let's say Empire, for instance, with Jussie Smollett. And then also with the movie with Moonlight and Brokeback Mountain, because for me those movies wasn't about sex. It was about intimacy and love between two individuals. So.
Thank you. When you mentioned Brokeback Mountain, I mean, when that movie came out, there were women, couples, husbands and wives, they went to see it and they were like, it's just a love story. That's all it was. It wasn't about two men. It was just, they looked at it as just a love story.
Okay, so 3, I guess, comments. Sitting here listening from the beginning. 1, this young lady should be in this panel. Your comments. I have to say, I did cringe a little every time you mentioned the church. Only because, in my opinion, I believe that we've looked and we've used that as a scapegoat for so long that we have to stop blaming the church. Those that are going, or those who choose to go to a church, and I should preface, I am a deacon, that we should really be selling that the church is there for a whole different purpose. You should not be talking about heterosexual sex in the church. You should not be talking about homosexual sex in the church. You should be talking about whatever your divinity is, bringing yourself to Jesus, understanding your Holy Spirit. So I feel like this whole church talk is kind of a scapegoat. I really think, and I really agree with the gentleman at the end, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, said this goes back to the family. And the family is not just who's in your house. Brother Jason, who just walked in, he'll tell you, he'll snatch kids off the street and talk to them. The family is all of us. We need to talk, and we need to talk not just about HIV. We need to talk about health. We don't talk about health. We don't talk about diabetes. We don't talk about cancer. We don't talk about healthy diets. And HIV falls right in it. They're scared to talk about it. So we have to start developing this dialect that it's all right to talk about health. Let's talk about how to keep ourselves healthy sexually, how to keep ourselves healthy, from our cholesterol, our heart disease. Number one killer of women. How do you not talk about that? And so we have to make sure that we start that ball rolling. Let's talk about health. And let's not wait on the church to do it. The fact that the church does it, wonderful. They don't? Okay. What's some of the things that you do in schools? Wonderful. But that should start coming from the home, from the community. We got to talk to everybody all the time.
I agree with you that, yes, it definitely should start in the home. But our families go to church. And our church is, right, but we're talking about those. But the church is accountable. The church is the community. So the health, all of that should be discussed in the church. Not blaming the church, but definitely getting them involved so that they can be a part of the education of what's going on in their community.
Yeah, that is true. And I think that, and I agree with what you're saying about the church, but the church also has a responsibility for taking care of the whole person. Not just their spirituality, but the entire person. Because if I'm not healthy, I can't come to church. If I'm having all these other issues with my health issues, I'm not going to be able to get to church. So I think the church should be responsible for the total man, not just only his spirituality, but everything else that's included with him. This is my opinion. The young lady, we'll get to you, John.
No, I wanted to, probably because I'm someone who follows Christ. I won't say Christian, but I'm someone who follows Christ. And the greatest thing that Christ did to me was be relevant to his time. People can whitewash Christ, but Christ was very much involved in the political atmosphere of his time. He said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God," but he told this counter people who was trying to make Christianity a dogmatic religion. So we have to use God or Jesus as an example. Jesus was he was in his community. And so for me, if the church is not engaging with the community, they aren't doing God's work. They're not doing the work of Christ. So for me, what I'm doing right now is the work of Christ. So I feel like we have to be very clear on what Jesus stood for and what Jesus did. And Jesus was not a docile man. He was in the community and he was shaking things up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sabrina James and I work with Brown County Public Schools. The panel mentioned about sex ed in schools. Well, for us, Broward County, we passed a comprehensive policy for family life and human sexuality. Our sex education is inclusive. But I know one of the panelists mentioned about the fact that we need to do more in schools. But this is where you all can come in because we are held to Florida state statutes. So Florida State Statute 1003.46 even still has language where it talks about school systems can teach about HIV and AIDS, and if they do talk about anything as it relates to family life and human sexuality, that they can also mention about abstinence and people being married before they have sex. All that's a part of the state statutes. So if we want things to change where the school system doesn't have to, the statute also talks about parents having a right to opt their children out of family life and human sexuality. There are certain things that we try to push for, but we can't do anything because of the state statute. The state statute also talks about us being able to refer students to contraceptive services and, condoms. When you really look it up in Wikipedia or the dictionary, a condom can be considered a contraceptive device. So therefore, once again, we are held to those same standards. So if we want to change some of these things that are happening in our school system, then one of my suggestions is that we go to our legislators and our elected officials and let them know about the importance of what is needed for our young people and how, and by doing those things, we'll be able to reduce some of the rates of HIV and AIDS in Broward County. We'll also be able to help with the STD rates. I do know that in 2006 they did try to mandate schools to be able to teach comprehensive sex ed in the state of Florida, but that did not pass. So if we want these things to happen, we have to get up there and we have to make those changes. We are trying to do our part in Broward County Public Schools, and I must say that I do think that we're doing a great job. We have an LGBT coordinator. We've received a CDC grant, and we have someone who works for targeting our young Black and Latino young men who have sex with men. You know, we have a team that works with family life and human sexuality in all of our schools with a specific targeted schools. So we're trying to do certain things, but we need you all behind us to help move things forward.
Thank you, Sabrina. So yeah, I heard that. Contact your legislators, contact your elected officials, and talk to them and tell them what you think is needed. Because they're not going to make those changes unless we, the people, say that we need those, and we want those changes. Sorry, what?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pastor Tori of New Horizon International Sanctuary. Let me first start off by saying that what's happening in the community has quite a lot to do with the church. I know it for a fact. As the statement was said, you're going to hell because of this or because of that, or whatever it is. And it was drilled. And at the end of the day, like he said, only God makes that final judgment. And so now we're living in a world, even now from then, even up until now, that the Black church mold the Black community.
Yes.
And what they said, it doesn't matter what the law said, what they said, or what the pastor said, or whatever he preached, that was law to the Black community. And so if it was taught, there, you got to understand that Black folk are always taught two things. You have two homes, your home church and your home that you live in. And the Bible says training starts at home. So whatever you're trained at home, that's what you spread abroad. And of course, if you're going to be secretive about anything and you're going to hide it, you don't want anybody else to know, not even the church folks or anything else. So of course, we're taught a certain mentality to hide this stuff. And it does have to stop. And I realized that it had to stop. I had a conversation with my 6-year-old daughter last night who said to me, my friend told me that her grandmother and grandfather split up and now the grandma have a girlfriend. So, of course, that was a slap in my face, like, you're a pastor, so what did you tell your children? It starts at home. So, and you probably wonder what I told her, of course. and what I did tell her, first of all, let me start off. I had to learn something totally different. I grew up Baptist minister, ordained as a Baptist minister, and now I'm a non-denominational ministry. And what I had to understand is that when I looked at the gay community, number one, my cousin, who's gay, I love him. And I looked at my brother, and I had to make a decision that this is not something that was neither forced upon them or by choice. It's just who they are. It's who they are. So what do I do as a Christian? What do I do as a pastor? What do I do as a family member? Do I push them away or do I love them? Do I stand in the pulpit and teach sex? Yeah, I absolutely do. I teach sex. I teach about gender. So what I said to her, I said, listen, babe, everyone has a choice. And I told her what the Bible said, and I told her whatever her choice is in life. She wanted to know. Her thing was, her friend said that everybody, the male and female, we all had dealings. That's what the kids was telling the other kids at the school. So it starts at home. It's what you teach at home, at church, in your home. So I had to tell her, listen, you choose whatever you want. You're still going to be loved. And that's what's not taught, love. Jesus Christ came to show love. The Bible says love covers a multitude of sin. It don't matter what kind of sin it is. It don't matter whether you agree with it or not. It's the foundation of love that is missing, love of just showing one another you care for one another. And be honest with you, while I'm here, I want to bridge this gap. I want to see what do it take to break this stigma in the black community.
Yeah.
Okay, so something that you said, the questions for everyone, you said that when you were talking about the homophobia in the black community, and you said we need to hold the black community accountable for that.
Yes.
How do we do that? How do we hold the black community accountable for the homophobia that's so large in that community?
That's a good question.
Well, I turned the mic off. Okay.
Well, first, every problem with, this is kind of radical, but every problem that we have in the black community, I will always say stems from white supremacy. Black men have inherited our masculinity from white supremacy. So I wanted the conversation to be about the fact that we were brought up in a white supremacist country, in a patriarchal country, and in a cis-normative country. People don't even understand gender still to this day, and there's so many resources. So once we talk about white supremacy and its subsidiaries, we can say openly this is wrong. I think a lot of times among white people who don't feel comfortable with racism, oftentimes they won't call out their white friend on the racism. And so when you see straight people who aren't okay with homophobia, they also won't call out the homophobia when they see it. So I think on the micro level, we have to start holding our black friends or the black community accountable at home or in the club or at school or whatever, because that's where it starts. It starts within its micro groups. Straight people are going to have to start saying, yo, that homophobia stuff, that's not cool. Hypermasculinity is not cool. It's not cool to not be able to, feel free to show emotion. I mean, what kind of world would it be? How much more developed would we be as a world if men were just allowed to cry and to express themselves? That type of emotional intelligence will prompt empathy. The reason why, and I know this is on Facebook, but the reason why America has no problem blowing up other countries is because it's not American soil. We have to start seeing people as people in a shared community. If there's no empathy, if we don't see each other as ourselves, then there won't be any progress. Particularly with the black community, I'm a huge rap fan, huge Kendrick fan, Young Thug, all of that stuff. I have yet to see the black community be as welcoming to Young Thug and his gender representation as they are to Young A and her gender representation. So we have to stop the double standard. If a man wants to present his gender the way Prince did, he should be free to do that, and he deserves validation within his own community. We have to start. I don't want to say forcing black folks to like grow up, but in a sense you have to. There shouldn't be 2 or 3 princes for a lifetime. There are a lot of men who don't want to, like me. I love wearing crop tops, and I like wearing shorts, even though I got like really skinny legs. So depending on the day, my gender presentation can be very fluid. Like it's hot. I ain't finna wear no jersey or no big shirt. I just wear crop tops with these abs. I can do that. But I get a lot of stigma from that within my community. So I think it's about not forcing your community to accept you, but holding them accountable when they don't accept you. Like one time I painted my nails black. My friend was like, well, why did you paint your nails black? And I was like, why wouldn't I? And he was like, oh, that's feminine. Who determines what's feminine? We have to think about where do these types of gender roles and these sexual roles come from. They come from a patriarchal system that is built on power structures. So the men are supposed to be in power, and this is the way you're supposed to be a man. Anything that deviates from that is supposed to be demonized. And we have to hold black people accountable for thinking in that way. If we want racial progress, that also includes misogyny being thrown away. Transphobia has to go away. Homophobia has to go away. Sexual violence has to go away. You cannot lobby against white supremacy, but be silent when it comes to homophobia or transphobia. We need intersectional feminism. Like I have friends who won't go to church if the pastor is a woman. that makes no. I didn't know Jesus only gave the Spirit to like one gender. Like it doesn't make sense. We have to start holding each other accountable for, like, if someone were to say that, oh, would be homophobic to me, I would say, how would you feel if a white person didn't let you win because you're black? I don't like comparing struggles, but I like comparing empathetic notions. How can you say that you want this progress, but you're denying progress to someone else? The black community has to stop rallying against white supremacy but being silent on transphobia. Many of the transphobes that are killed are also black. Violence against transphobe happen predominantly in the black community. So we have to start seeing it as a universal problem, it's not as a particular problem. And that starts out with calling out at the micro level, but then lobbying at the state level, which was what the young lady said, which is what I do.
All right, thank you so much. Anyone else on the panel want to chime in? And I have Cassandra, and this may be nearing the end of our community conversation. Hold on.
Okay, mine is, I was trying to come up with a question. Well, mine's talks about, I know that stigma is obviously a big barrier within our community. And one of the parts of stigma that kind of keeps it in place, it being a barrier, is language. And I know specifically, I'm a MAC coordinator out of St. Louis County, so that's where I came from tonight. And one of my biggest hurdles is getting into the LGBTQ community, because I identify myself as an ally. But even, using the health department behind my name, people will like close the phone on my face, which I totally understand the things that happen. But when we're talking about language, specifically here, I noted that you deliberately used the language same gender loving men. So what is kind of like the juxtaposition or the purposeful exclusion of using like MSM? That's I don't know people who know me.
Well, I'll chime in first because I use it. Same gender loving men was primarily a term that was used. Well, let me go to MSM first. MSM was used because when CDC was putting money into it, it came from black men are the ones who said we wanted MSM. It was not CDC. Black men are the ones from San Francisco, Chicago, New York. Those were the men who said we're not gay. A lot of us don't identify with the term gay, so therefore they had to come up with something different. That's why MSM was created and coined by black gay men. That's why that term is used. Same gender loving men, same thing is used because, again, we don't necessarily sometimes identify with the gay terminology because most people think about gay. When I think about gay, sometimes I think about a white person. I don't think about me as a black man because that's not who I am. I'm more of a same gender loving man. I love the gender of this other person. And it could be the same gender loving women. It could be so it's not about necessarily only saying it's about men, it could be women as well. But those two terms are based on not identifying with the Eurocentric view of the gay. That's why those two terms are used.
The other day, because I love language, and I think language can be used politically, but also essentially and individually. I like the latter term, same gender loving men, because a lot of people, in relation to MSM, because people still think that to be queer is merely a sexual phenomenon. It's not a sexual, it's not easily reducible to sex. People have asking me, so what does it feel like to kiss a girl and kiss a dude? It's the same thing. The emotion is the same. So I think when people say, well, for me, for me it is. And so when people use same gender loving men, that means that what queer folks, I don't identify as anything. I would rather just say I just kiss somebody that's pretty. When we use that word, it means that we don't want to be reduced to our genitalia and say that we only do this because we want to get off. So I think the reason why people have a problem with MSM is because there's such a hypersexual lens on the queer community that people just think it's just a bunch of hedonistic folks who just still have sex. But gay relationships tend to last longer and be more healthier than a straight counterpart. So that means that there has to be some kind of fundamental love different. So I think that's why people prefer to use the term same gender loving men.
This is going to be our last question for tonight, and I do want to thank people for coming.
Good afternoon, evening, whatever time it is.
My name is Keisha. So I just have an announcement, it's not a question or a comment. On May 11th at Dillard High School, starting at 6:30 p.m., we're having our Hear Our Voices, which is on homophobia and transphobia in the Black communities that specifically affects children. So I definitely invite all of you to come out. I am organizing it with a few other people, so if you want details about that, you can definitely see me afterward. Thank you so much. Stay Black and prosperous.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Questions, comments?
My name is Carlos. I just have a question. I want to know how we are effectively communicating in targeting the Black community on HIV and AIDS, because the rates are really skyrocketing, and it's still, numbers are high every day. So I wanted to know how are we effectively communicating in those particular areas? What are we doing? What is to come? What can we do? Because we do this Brothaspeak thing, and we've had this conversation a few times, and it come up, and all of us say what we want to do, but it's so hard to get out there into these different communities without having that information. There's so much pamphlets out there that they don't have those faces. They are not identifying with other races in their faces on these particular pamphlets. Do we need to change the faces to say, hey, this is what they look like? I don't know how you effectively communicate, to this particular community, because the rates are really high. So something is not connected. So how do we connect? That's what I want to do.
As she mentioned, we are in the schools, we're in the community, there are mobile vans that are in the community all over at all times. There are different events that go on in the community all the time that whether they're testing or we're doing education, handing out condoms and educating, we're out there. We are always thinking of new ways and new avenues of going places that we haven't gone. So we're out there. And the pamphlets, they look like us. They do.
Well, for me, I think a part of it is really that we as a people need to stop lying and just start being honest about HIV, start being honest about what we do and what we don't do. And we have to start to be honest about our sexuality and the things that we do. Because you talk to a group of people, you say, well, I use condoms consistently and correctly every time I have sex. If that's the case, then why in the world are all of our rates of HIV going up among our people? Somebody's not being honest, because if we are doing that consistently and using condoms correctly, then the rates should be decreasing.
But they are. That's the thing. Last year, the rates among Black women plateaued, so it's not like they're rising anymore. They are starting to plateau. Also, I'm a grassroots mobilizer. It's my job to get folks out in the community and come together. I like to work with you. And I like to work with the pastor. So anybody that wants to get out with me and push sexual health and care, I'm here after. I have a business card, and you can contact me. I'm always willing to work with people and to collaborate within the community. That's what I'm here for. So I'll speak with you and anyone else that wants to work with me.
I want to thank you all for coming out this evening. I'm going to give each person on the panel an opportunity to give their last thoughts, and then we'll call it. And we'll start with Melvin and work our way over to Jonathan.
Just a brief thank you for coming out and taking on this conversation, and I hope that the end goal is for us to develop some kind of action plan to address some of the issues that were brought forward.
I also want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Also, just maybe a takeaway, because I know we talked about it starts in the home. Just remember our children who don't have the home, to be honest. Let us make sure that we do our part as a community, being those mentors, joining organizations and community events where they can see that, where they can see positive, not the craziness that they see at home, so they can actually, the church, as we mentioned, and having these real conversations and being honest with where we are as a community, so we can continue to excel as people.
I do want to add to what you're saying about having real conversations. If you really do, you have to have those real conversations at home with as young as 6 years old. If they're asking questions, you have to be able to answer them. And we're out there.
I'm sorry. Okay. My last thought will be just like action. A lot of theory and like things. We can always have these dialogues, but the point is action. I'm open to speak with anybody afterwards on what we can do. I don't love the church, but I would definitely I would love to work with the church and the people of God if we are going to be mobilizing in our community and doing real Christ work. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And anybody that's like wants to work with me, I don't. This is cool, but I don't want to be some kind of like educated black man who isn't in the community. I really want to change the scope of sexual health and inclusion and intersection of feminism in this community, because that's what this country needs. So a takeaway from this would be, if you really want to like work and you really want to be in the community, I'm always here. I'll give you my card and contact information. And thank you for coming.
All right, one of the things I want to do is also, in addition to what Jonathan's saying and everything else, we also here at the Pride Center, especially our Kiki Project, we're always open to doing this type of work, but we also want to do outreach and that type of stuff. So if this is the type of stuff you want to do, everyone says they want to do different things, please contact myself or Jakari. Put it on the sign-in sheet we had down there whether or not you want to volunteer, because a part of the volunteering could be working with Jonathan, going and doing some of that grassroots, door-to-door stuff out in the community, talking to the community about HIV, talking about AIDS, talking about the things that are important that are happening in our community. So if you're interested in actually doing some of the work, because like you were saying, a lot of people that come to these types of meetings, and at this meeting, oh my God, the passion is so high. It's so high, you can cut it with a knife. But tomorrow, if I call you and say, hey, Jonathan, Sam, Bob, can you do, oh, child, I'm tired. So if you're really interested in doing some work, please, if you're really interested in actually doing it, not just talking about it, actually hitting the streets and pounding the pavement, please contact us, because we can use you. We can have you as a part of what we're trying to do in our community to talk to our people. So if you're really serious about that, please contact myself or Jonathan, and we can get you out there doing some of this type of work if this is what you really want to do. And if it's not, that's fine too, because the work is still going to get done. So, but again, I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Hope you got some valuable information. I hope you're given an opportunity to share some of the things that you want that were pressing on your heart, mind, and spirit. We just want to thank you. You have a comment, sir?
I'd like to say,
okay.
I want you to, as a white person, I want you to know we have the same problem. I don't believe it's just because you're black skin. Your culture puts you as the gay person. Oh, you're going to hell, you're going to this and all that. This man's a spiritual man. The other one's religion. And there's a big difference. Teach the difference between facts and opinions.
Especially now.
And speak of the spiritual choices. And you will have a happier person. Don't worry about it. You're not unique. You're not unique. Culture has that part. The function of religion is to control the rate of change.
Come on.
Wow.
I'm gonna stop. I love that.
I want you to know that you are not unique. No matter what your color is, I have the same symptoms. I can feel that you feel it. I know what you went through. Oh, you gay, you sissy. All that whole thing. Oh, you're not a man, you're not a boy. I got grandchildren. I have a wonderful time. Be happy. And keep loving everybody. That's all. I just want you to know.
Thank you. And again, thank you all for coming out. I do appreciate it.